They might not look much, but those drawings are going to put a few smiles and some faces back at the workshop. They're the last surviving plans of a boiler so efficient that it kept the Sentinels going until the 1950s. Thousands of Sentinels were built here, and the archive holds photos of hundreds of them.
There's some great pictures here of the brand new Sentinels coming out of what I presume are the factory gates.
That's right.
And is this factory still around?
Yes, you can go and see that.
Now, Andrew, you wouldn't know anybody else who might be able to help a little bit with the history of the Sentinel?
Well, there's one man in particular who could help you, and he wrote the book, basically, a man called Tony Thomas.
Fantastic.
I think you should chase him down.
I'll try and track him down, thanks.
Sadly, my quest for Tony Thomas is going to have to wait, as down in Somerset, there are two cold engineers awaiting some blueprints.
You can get any accurate measurement, really.
And like Superman, he arrives just at the right moment. I've got something here for you. But firstly, Andy, I'd like to say, looking around here, I'm not overly reassured that we're ever going to get our boiler done. What are you doing, collecting them?
No, don't worry. I mean, only a short queue. 10 years or so, no more.
Yeah. No, well, on a serious note, yes, I've been to the Shrewsbury Public Records Office, and I do believe I have the original dimensions. There you are.
We're bound to be right now.
Well, I also got a tip that there's a local historian, Mr. Tony Thomas, who might be able to fill in a little bit of the background of the Sentinel, so I'm off to see him. Make sure that one goes to the front of the queue, Claire.
All right, cheerio.
See you, so.
Let's have a look.
I'll have to put my tea down for this. This is important stuff. The most important measurement of all is the distance from that flange to the flange at the bottom. Now, that just happens to be where the drawing is a bit shaky.
No, hang on. Isn't it transferred on that side? There you go, it's on that side. You're looking on the wrong side, Andy. There it is. 3
You're
foot,
right.
10 and a... is that a
3
quarter?
foot 10 and a quarter, I would think.
Right, chap.
Yeah.
I'll leave you to it. I'll see
Lovely.
you later, all right?
Yeah. See you, Claire.
Bye. While Andy gets on with working out how we're going to make those curved flanges, I'm off to Deepdale Engineering in Birmingham to make the steel tube that will eventually turn into our outer jacket with the help of one Des Jones and a lot of beefy kit. To reconstruct the boiler, we'll need a completely new outer jacket for it. And believe it or not, this will be constructed from a single sheet of metal. This one, in fact. The first job is to slowly roll it into a cylinder, keeping our fingers crossed that when the two edges finally meet up, they'll be perfectly lined up. And that's only going to happen if we put it into the rollers perfectly straight in the first place. Does that look all right?
Beautiful.
You sure?
Perfect.
Says it's square?
Yeah.
And if you're thinking that checking it by eye doesn't seem very accurate, it is if you've been doing it for 20 years. One tweak and Des reckons it's perfect. I bet I won't find that in any tool catalogue anywhere, will I?
Oh, mate.
In preparation for the final weld, I just need to burn off excess dirt and dust, which may have lodged in the seam. And now, the moment of truth. The cylinder must meet our specifications exactly, otherwise it won't fit round the firebox. So it's out with the tape to measure the circumference of each end.
I don't know what we do. 2594. 2595. 1 mil and 2 mil on third, which is not the mill on diver, that perfect point.
Now that doesn't mean very much, Steve, but the perfect pipe did. I understand that. Next, the boiler has to be welded. To make a strong permanent bond, a high-tech laser-guided machine is used. This contraption creates a weld as thick and strong as the metal around it. With a perfect weld down the seam, we have the beginnings of our outer jacket, but that's the easy work done. They turn out dozens of tubes like this every day. What we're going to do next has hardly been done for 60 years. The plan is to bend the ends of the cylinder inwards to form two flanges into which the firebox will be bolted. On paper, it's simple. Put a former inside, apply heat, and push the metal hard against the former. Voila! Job's a good un. Key to the process is this monster, a massive hydraulic press capable of pushing down with a force of 200 tons. The military used to use it for all sorts of hush-hush things that were built to go bang in some way. But now we've got to adapt it to build a Sentinel boiler that won't go bang in any way. The first part of the job is to drop in the former. This is the mould for the flange. Then we'll put the whole lot under the massive press and we're ready to go. That's the theory. Sounds good, eh? But neither Andy or I really know if it's going to work, so the heat is on.
It's not going to be easy making the outer wrapper for the boiler. You start off with a very simple steel tube. The hard bit is making the flanges at either end. You've got to bend the metal around, and as soon as you do that, you end up with creases. You're going to have to lose that material somewhere. It's not going to be an easy job.
Getting all scientific about it, what we're trying to do is to get the metal so soft we can mould it, just like a potter shapes clay. We'll actually end up with the metal around the flange being around 1/8 of an inch thicker than the rest of the boiler. The key is to make sure we don't get any creases, as they'll be almost impossible to get out.
We're putting so much heat into the job, it's unbelievable. You cannot begin to imagine how hot it is in this corner of the workshop. But when you put the press on it, it just folds like butter.
After 4 hours of inching the metal into shape bit by bit, constantly adjusting the heat and pressure, disaster strikes. Suddenly, a crease appears.
Pushed it too hard, see? Pushed it too hard in one place. Yeah, just too much hard.
Too enthusiastic.
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, we weren't putting much more pressure on than we had done before, but it was just that at that moment it was too much, you know?
Now it's creased, it's going to be virtually impossible to stop it creasing again. After all the long hours we've spent getting this far, one tiny push too much, and now the whole lot could be scrap. The big question is, can we save it?
A big decision, that is. I don't know. I don't know. We'll see.
This week's puffing beauty, a 1931 Sentinel DG4, is a love of two thrusting lads, Edward and Andrew Goddard. Love steam as I do, I'm more likely to end up going for Mr. September, as my attempts at rebuilding their Sentinel boiler are not going too well. We're actually trying to do the impossible here, put a smooth flange in the end of a tube. And as is the way with the impossible, it's not working. After 4 hours of gentle coaxing into shape, a crease has suddenly appeared in the flange. At this moment, no one knows if we're going to be able to coax it back out again. And if we can't, this whole lot's heading for the scrap heap.
Yeah, that's where it started to corrugate. Here, it's corrugated. The rest of it's fine. But we want to try to fix this first.
With things not going too well in Somerset, I'm heading to meet a chap who I hope is going to be able to tell me a bit more about our Sentinel's history. Well, I've come here to Shrewsbury, to the site of the original Sentinel factory, which was moved here from Glasgow in 1915. And I wonder, is there any of it left? The Sentinel production line was as advanced as any making diesel trucks at the time. And you can see the scale of things from the buildings still standing. But somewhere round here should be author and Sentinel enthusiast Tony Thomas. Hopefully he can tell me why the Sentinel, so advanced for its time, finally ran out of steam. You must be Tony.
Hello.
How do you do? Is there any chance you could show us around?
Oh, certainly. Yeah,
Great.
come on.
If anyone can fill in the blanks of the history of our Sentinel, it's Tony. So Tony, here we are, what's left of the old Sentinel factory.
Yes, well, these are the buildings in which they were built. During the manufacturing from 1915 to 1938, they made 6,500 steam locomotives at this factory.
And what's brought about the demise of these fabulous
Well,
vehicles?
it was an uphill battle against the diesels and the petrol lorries. That was one of the things that led to the demise, was the fact that it could take you over an hour just to raise steam before you could move.
To us, it's obvious that diesel is better than steam. But back then, diesel was a bit newfangled, while steam was well understood. But what about our sentinel, number 8571?
Well, 8571 was built in August 1931 for Samuel Banner of Bootle. I've got a photograph of it here.
Fantastic. And this is our lorry.
Many of them were in fact taken in the lay-by across the road here with a sentinel housing that they built for their employees in the background. Well, they had it for 3 years, then it was sold to Paul Brothers of Liverpool, who were millers, and they had it until 1949. Then it was rescued from the scrapman by Edgar Schoen. Edgar Schoen had it restored. This is it in 1916.
50 years ago, Edgar Schoen would have been considered a crank, a nutter who insisted on paying good money for scrap. But now he's a bit of a hero, and he's certainly the reason our sentinel is still with us, even if it can't chuff.
If anything, we have got a bit too much heat. This is a little bit much. It's got to be red,
Yeah.
but
Not cherry
but
red.
not bright red, not orange red. Just sort of a
Yeah.
a cherry red, really. Yeah.
After another 5 hours nudging cherry red metal into shape, we have the flanges completed. They may not look much, but just try making them on the end of a toilet roll and you'll see how hard it is. With Andy admiring his handiwork, my next stop is Hollyoaks Coach Builders to repair the cab with Bob Brown. It's the only other big job, as Edward and Andrew already had the chassis and running gear repaired.
Hi, Claire.
How's
Hiya.
it going?
Oh, we're going to have to start from scratch. It's had it.
Andy was pulling those faces down in Somerset with the boiler.
No, it's past it. We're going to have to rebuild the clamp as new as it was originally. Start from scratch.
It's looking very sad.
Yeah, it has. It's had it. It's had it, unfortunately.
It's odd. I don't feel too bad hacking off bits of rusted metal, but carting off that rotten cab didn't feel right somehow. But soon, there'll be a new one in its place.
There's a big plate under it. That's it. Right. Okay.
The cab is mainly made of wood, with a steel apron round the front of the boiler, and 3 metal posts holding up a planked and tarred roof.
26.5.
The first problem is going to be finding some quality wood to rebuild the main frame.
Got a piece of mahogany which I think will do the job.
Yeah? You sure there's enough?
Oh, yeah, there's enough. As you can see, from that end to that end, about 24 foot.
That is a monster of a plank, just being used as a bit of flooring.
That's been there for 30 years.
So it's
as I
well
know.
and truly seasoned
Well
then?
and truly seasoned.
Right. Should we
And I
get it out of here and machine it?
Yep, we'll do that.
The original Sentinels would have used good old British ash. But heck, we're getting this foreign stuff for free.
Because I've got no plans,
Got no measured drawings?
no measure drawings or nothing.
So we're copying the original?
That's it. We're going to copy this piece here, do some measurements, and then we'll machine it out.
All this woodwork takes far longer than you'd expect. I'm going to leave Bob to get on with it and head back to Somerset.